Amen. Donga Madum. I say.
I am Bongkishiy Aloysius from the youth. I come from Kian in Kumbu Central subdivision, a few kilometers from the market in Ver. I'm born in 1953, precisely in the month of March, and the joy of being born in the Banso Baptist Hospital maternity were almost the first set of people who enjoyed that facility when it came on. I am the first out of a family of 8. We are 5 boys and 3 girls. So I went to primary school very early, 6 years, and I had to trek for 7 kilometers because of this idea of Protestant Catholicism. And so there was a primary school by me, which was a Catholic school, and I had to go to Basel Mission School in Kumbu, trekking from Kian for about 7 kilometers to get to school at 6 years. Now, why did I go to school so early? My father happened to have worked with the German Baptist missionaries in Du area, and when he came back to Kumbu, the Second World War had ended and the German missionaries were no longer there. So he joined the Basel missionaries and became an elder of the Basel mission and traveled wide to Lagos, to Boya and to Bali. And so he admired sending children to school, and that's how I was seized from my mother's breast and sent to school. So the idea of what motivated my father was the motivating factor, and he admired seeing children go to school. Now the girl child, he trained children in his congregation who were not of his family, because when he traveled to Lagos, to Boya, he saw how girls would work in hospital and they were teachers, and he wanted and admired and carried that vision that he would want to see his own family, his own congregation, and the people in Seoul behave and send children to school. So he was an agent of development. Everywhere in church he went, he was always talking about send children to school. So the girl child with him was the same like the boy child. So he promoted education and did not discriminate. But in our days, very few girls were with us in class. If they had to go, even they came, they were almost mothers, because they had to stay behind, take care of their siblings, the younger ones, babysit them, and then come up someday when they are already like 15 and 16 before they start infants 1. So you can imagine, I was in class when I was asked in infants 1, what is your father's name? I started crying because I knew that nobody could mention and call his father's name, a toddler like me. It was a taboo to start calling your father's name. So there was a lady from our congregation and from my village who had to help the infants 1 teacher give my father's name. So the girls also were forced to stay and get married so that they could have money to feed the other children. They would also take care of the mother's farms, and they were supposed to be so obedient that once your father said you are not going to school, you have nothing else to do than to go to school or to stay at home and take care of your siblings. So the girl child was very much disfavored. I want to also highlight that poverty was so hard, and the white man education needed money. So people did not see why they would take money and go and give to somebody to say that a child should be trained. So that was an inhibition. It retarded going to school. Furthermore, the civilization and the notion of going to school, why children were given birth to at the time as a force for labor in the farms, was they had to use them to as portage. You run around with your father to the palace, you're going on errands, and so why go and stay in a white man place idling while papa needs you to do errands for him? So that was a big inhibition, and it retarded schooling in those days. You need to see some of the people with whom I sat in class shaving their beards because they came in late. Some had to pay their own fees, some had to be rebellious to their parents, and so they came to school like, I admire this thing, and whether somebody sends me or not, whether my parents call me an outcast or not, I will go to school. So I want to thank my parents, Samuel Bongkishiy, Kongmi and Ma Helena Wikong, who is still alive. Unfortunately, my father is of late. His picture is up that way, and he actually helped not only me, educated so many of our village folks, and forced the parents also to send them to school. Thereafter, primary school, my headmaster, class 7 headmaster, knew that there was a college in a secondary school in Ndu called Ndu Baptist College. At the time, it had been named Joseph Merrick Baptist College. So he advised my father, the class 7 teacher who was our headmaster, Mr. Yung Kung, that I should write the common entrance, which I wrote and passed, and I was admitted by Dr. Norman Hopt into Form 1, and in September of 1966, I was a college boy at the age of 12 and a fraction. I was one of the smallest in our class because virtually, I'm telling you that some of the boys who came from Victoria, they came from Bamenda, asked me, when did this one go to school that is already in Form 1 in college? And so I was small, and they would beat me and kick me around the place. But I enjoyed it since I was sharing the privilege of going to school so early. And I was admired for coming to school at this kind of age. Where did this one come from? But the answer was, I grew up in missionary circles and around the Christian domain, and that's why my father was able to push me to college at the time. The interesting thing, the life in JMBC, it was an ordered and patterned life where you came to be civilized. You came to be given an education which was a whole man education, a Christian education, a spiritual education. You were given an academic education, and you were trained to go out as a complete man, what you call the whole man. And JMBC remains my own university, because what could you admire in JMBC? First, when I got to JMBC, I'd grown around BBH, and I found the prep room. There was the physics lab, the chemistry lab, and the biology lab, and then there was in between two of the laboratories, you would find a prep room with the bureaus, with the beakers, with the Bunsen burners. And I said, there is a dispensary from PPH that is up here. No, my friends told me that here is a lab where you do experiments, and chemistry and biology are taught by experiments. Then I began and developed an interest in the white man's science, which we found in JMBC. The lab was very equipped. Another interesting thing was that I came from a rural primary school, suburban, and I was taught by 10 teachers, 8 of whom were whites. And so sometimes I would sit in class and I would not get what they are saying, because in primary school I listened to teachers who opened their mouth and spoke, while here there were people who were speaking either the English accent or the American accent. And I imagine one English lady would ask, what is the verb, what is the verb, what is the verb intransitive? So I would sit in class and I would not get anything that lady is saying, and I say, oh. And to get fees in those days was not easy. They were paying 6,000 francs a term. That was 36,000 for 1 year. How many parents in our community, our local area, had that kind of money? So you had to work very hard to defend your father's money. And how many of you even left primary school and continued to college? Very few, because the parents were, not because the children, the pupils were not intelligent, it was because the money was not there. And how many schools did we have? After Joseph Merrick Baptist College was St. Augustine's College, and then you had to travel to Bamenda to go to Longla, which was a commercial college, to get into Sacred Heart College, to get into Cameroon Protestant College, CPC Bali. And at the time, the class 7 was churning out thousands of class 7 leavers, with only 13 secondary schools at the time in British West Cameroon. So to get into college was, how many of us were there in Form 1? 40. 40 in Form 1A and 40 in Form 1B. So we're 80 out of the hundreds that applied to come in. And in all of Dongamantu, it was only Joseph Merrick Baptist College. Then next to us was the Bible Training College, which was a theological seminary training pastors, and we were just neighbors. borrowing teachers from that school, especially in English language and some other subjects that the teachers were not available. And one of the problems at the time was that we did not have enough graduates. They were not African graduates to teach in our colleges. So most of the people who taught us who were blacks were A-level holders or grade 1 teachers who had gone into Cas Bambili. And Cas Bambili it didn't have a first cycle. You had to only go there to do your second cycle and get your A-levels and continue to university. So my life in college, in primary school and in college, was interesting. Now the experiences. In primary school, I learned a lesson that people would leave far distant 40 kilometers, 30 kilometers and come to stay in Kumbu to be able to continue primary education. So we had dormitories in our setting in Basel Mission School in Kumbu. Some of the friends that we are today, we met them in primary school living in the dormitory. And the dormitory life was interesting, very patterned, very ordered, and the people were very disciplined because some of them were mature. They came there knowing what they came up for. And some of them looked like they were married before coming. If you saw them, they were big pa's and mamas, but the women never stayed in the dormitory. They were mostly the boys. The scenario at the time was that they had feeder schools. The rural enclave schools were up to standard 3. And when we were getting to standard 4, you would now write a competitive examination and then they select those who are coming into the main school, which was the Basel Mission School, the lone standard 6 school, which became a class 7 school. Sonse, Vekovi, Wainama, Zeng, Kishon would constitute and send people who would come to the mother school. So you can imagine what it took to get into a standard 6 in those days. I remember I had people who came in from Tabiken, they came in from Tundip to study in Basel Mission School. So there was dormitory life. The interesting thing is that these people will be cooking. They had to fetch their firewood and they hold the pot with their hands, and then somebody's making firewood and the other one is churning fufu just for them to be able to leave and go to school. And so we had a headmaster who knew everything. He was a carpenter, he was a teacher, he was a bricklayer, he was a road maker, and we thought that these people were not human. And then we found some who would sing like angels. One just died, P.V. Adams, one of our very, very enigmatic and inspiring teachers that I ever found in my life. A tall gentleman. When we had Empire Day, that means the day, what you call the 11th February in those days, it was called Empire Day. The British Empire honored that empire by congregating and doing sporting activities. So this man would stand on a football field of about 100 meters and sound something like a cardboard. He would roll it, fold it, and then make announcements. And the voice would come, roaring like the voice that was coming from a certain, a non-human being. When I found him years after, I asked God whether this man was human. You created this man for us. So that was one of the very good experiences I had in primary school. Then in secondary school, we never saw our teachers as far as school administration was concerned. A prefect system that was impeccable. Your senior prefect was your discipline master. These prefects were the persons who ran the school. And we had dormitory life. We had about 6 dormitories, and we were divided. There were about 36, 37 in each dormitory, and so 361 students in that college when I got into that place.